I decided to take this pack and I'm going to show you how to go from this to this. So feel free to follow along. This would be a great base for your first game in Unreal, or something you could take and enhance on your own and give to your friends to play. Hey crew, and welcome back. So the other day I decided to make a Halloween themed game. I saw some free assets from the friendly guys over at gamedev TV, so I decided to grab those and put something together to play. So feel free to follow along, and this would be a great base for you to make your first game, or even take it, enhance it, and give it to your friends to play. So let's get started. I'll leave a link to this in the description, but if you go over to gamedev.tv, first of all, I'm not affiliated with gamedev.tv. I just like some of their content, some of their courses, and I did appreciate this free Halloween pack that they were giving away. So if you go to their site, gamedev.tv, click on products, browse all products, and then on the left, if you hit assets, for me, the first one that comes up is the Morning Manor Spooky Holiday Asset Pack. And right now it is free at the time of the recording of this video.
To celebrate the scariest time of the year, we're giving away.
I went ahead and grabbed this free pack right here. As you can see, there are buildings in here, pumpkins, rocks, and even a black cat. Spooky trees and some gravestones. So I went ahead and grabbed this. I downloaded it to my machine. Once I had this downloaded, I opened this in Blender. Now I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in Blender. I know just enough to be dangerous. But what I did was I came in here and selected all of these objects. I'll click on one and then I'll press A. I went to File, Export, and then I went down to FBX because I know that's a compatible version with Unreal. Go ahead and find a directory where I want to export this. On the right hand side, I'll just choose selected objects, and I'm just going to choose mesh, and then I'm going to hit export FBX. So depending upon your machine, that will run for a minute. This is Blender version 4.0. I think 4.2 or 4.3 is the most current version. I just haven't upgraded yet. So once I have those exported, you'll get this FBX file. And once you have that, you can go ahead and close Blender. We're done with it. And then go ahead and open Unreal. So for this, and start Unreal, go to Games, go to the first person template. On this, I am going to use the starter content. There's a couple things in there that we'll use for this game. Set your project location. I'm going to call mine Pumpkin Smash Game. So I'm Blueprint, Desktop, and Starter Content. Go ahead and hit Create. Let that load up. Once the project is loaded, I'm going to come down here and make a couple folders in our content browser. If you do not have this open, you can hit Control Space to open it. And then once that is open, you can say Dock and Layout, and it will leave this permanently down here for you. I do recommend that for these next couple steps. So first folder I'm going to add, I'm going to do underscore blueprints. I do the underscore because I prefer the folder to be at the top at all times. Next folder I'm going to make, I'm going to call asset. Inside of assets, I'm going to go ahead and open that up. Once I'm inside the asset folder, I'm going to go to the location where I downloaded my FBX file out of Blender. I'm going to go ahead and just drag that into this folder. From there, I'm going to hit reset to default, so we are both on the same screen here. For these, I don't plan on doing any animations. The black cat did have a skeleton rigged up in it. I'm not going to use that for this particular game. Due to this being low poly, I'm not going to worry about nanite on this. Depending upon what you're importing, you could turn that on. I'm going to leave everything else at its default state, and I'm just going to hit import. Now, if you want to out of Blender, you could export these one at a time so you have different FBX files for the cat, the pumpkins, the gravestones. I chose to do everything at once and then organize them in here. Once they're done importing, this is going to pop up, giving just a few warnings about some different aspects of what we just imported. It's not important for this game that we're making, so I'm just going ahead and close the screen. I'm going to make this a little bigger. So there's a few things we'll have to fix once these are inside of Unreal. So I'm just going to scroll down through here and take a look and see what we got. So I can see here on our grass that the material didn't work for that. So I'm going to double click the grass, open it up. I'm going to come over here and double click this material. And everything is set up, it just doesn't have the color. So I'm just going to double click that. I'm going to come down here, I'm going to choose a green that I like. I'm going to make that darker, it's just personal preference. I'm going to say okay. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to close this. And then we can see the grass picked up that material. So I'm going to go ahead and save the grass. Close that one. Look down through here. Now, this asset right here, I'm going to double click this. This is a panel that they built to get a glow from behind some of the doors, and you can see that in some of the previews on the site. I'm going to double click this. I'm going to come into this material. I'm going to come down here to shading model. I'm going to change that to unlit. So I'm going to go ahead and move this over. I'm going to add a scalar parameter. And I'm going to call this glow strength. And I'm doing this way so I can adjust this setting without having to open the material all the way back up later on. So I'm going to take our default color. I'm going to make this kind of a yellow to represent lights glowing in the house like they had in their preview images. I'm going to take this and get a multiply node. And I'm going to put a default value on our scalar parameter for, let's say 5 for right now. And then we're going to put that into emissive color. We're going to apply and save. Now you can see this panel has that glow to it. If you want to increase that strength, crank that up to 10, 20, 25, whatever you need. But I think for now I'm going to leave mine at 5 until I get to my level design and see how everything looks. So go ahead and close that. We're going to close this down. Just going to keep glancing down through here for a minute just to see how everything else looks. Here's our pumpkins. Here's our walking paths. Trees or windows. All right, for now I think we're good. If you want to at this point, you can go ahead and take a moment and create yourself some additional folders inside of here to move everything to. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do that right quick. Especially with the pumpkins, since we'll be doing some additional actions with them. If everything in your content browser, just a quick tip for you, if everything in your content browser is too big, you can hold down Control and scroll your mouse wheel up and down, and that will change the size of these for you. So I'm going to go ahead and grab these 3 pumpkins, these couple of stems, and I know these are the pumpkin materials, so I'm going to go ahead and grab these. I'm going to take all of those into the pumpkin folder, and I'm going to say move here. After that, up to you if you want to sort these any further. I'm going to go ahead and do that, so I will skip over the video a little bit to not bore you with that. Okay, now that I have that organized, while I was organizing, I did see that there was one more material we need to update, and that's for the candle. Notice on this candle, this particular one has a flame on it, is where the other one does not. So if we come over to the right side, there is candle flame. I'm going to double click that. I'm going to do the same thing we did to the window glow material and change this to unlit. It's over, do a scalar parameter. Name that glow strength. Once again, let's make this bright candle, put that at 10. Put a multiply node. Put these together and then put the output of that over to emissive color. And then I will update my color to be more like a candle flame. Get a little more on the orange side for that one. Going to go ahead and close that. And then we can see that's lit up. So let's save that and we will adjust that later. All right, now that we're organized, let's go ahead and talk about pivot points for a minute. I'm going to come in here on this level and I'm going to take the ground here. I'm just going to make some additional space for us. So I'm going to move that down and come in here. I'm just going to make some additional space for us. So let's take the X and the Y. I'm going to make these 60. And then let's go ahead and I'm just going to get rid of these two walls and some of these platforms, just so we have some additional space to play with. Okay, so if we're bringing our camera down, we'll notice on the items that we just imported, go ahead and grab the cat and drag that in. And you'll notice when I bring this in, we see the arrow, but we don't see the cat. So if I pull my camera out, we're gonna notice the cat's all the way over here. This has to do with the way things were exported from Blender. You can absolutely fix this in Blender when you export them, but I wanted to show you a couple different ways you can deal with this inside of Unreal. So if you notice the pivot points over here, if I move it around, the cat will move. So if I go to the cat, and if I alt middle click on the cat, wherever I alt middle click, it will temporarily set the pivot point there. Now this is great for quickly grabbing something and moving it, but you notice as soon as I let go, it puts it back to its original origin. So depending upon what you're doing, this is just a quick way to get around that setup, and maybe you need that setup for this being a packed level actor and having a collection. Could be a few different reasons why you would need a pivot point over there like that, but for this one, once again, just hold down Alt, click on it, and then I can move this according to where it's at. Like I said, it's a quick way to set this if you're in the middle of level design and just want to place something. It's not a permanent fix. So a way to fix this inside of Unreal so you don't have to go back to Blender every time is with your object selected, come up here where it says selection mode, come down here to modeling. If you don't have this, you may need to go into plugins and turn that on. But if I go to modeling, on the left, I go to where it says X-form. Then I say edit pivot, once again, with my object selected. I can zoom in, move around to my object and select a pivot point for that. So what I can do on the left side is I can hit center and you'll see this object kind of come over. I can do bottom if I wanted to. And if you move around, you can kind of get a sense of where that is on the object. If you don't want to do that, you can then also just grab this pivot point and turn it. Now you notice I do have snapping on, so it does obey that too. So you might want to adjust these numbers or just turn this off altogether, depending upon your needs for this particular model. So I think for this one, that's good enough right now for what I'm using it for. I'm not going to animate this character or anything. Always remember when you're in modeling mode to come down here and hit accept. If you leave the screen or anything else, you will lose those changes. So if I hit accept, go ahead and go back to selection mode. You notice now when I select the cat, the pivot point is in the center of that cat. So the way these were exported from Blender, you will need to do that for the various objects. There are other ways to play with the pivot points, but the two I've shown you are kind of the primary way, just a temporary and just a quick permanent. So for me, I'm going to add a candle into the world. I'm going to go find the candle. So I'm going to find the candle. In this case, I believe it is underneath. There it is. Modeling mode, X form, edit the pivot. I'm going to say center and bottom and hit accept. So then once I do that, click on that, I'm going to hit end so it puts it down to ground level. As you can see, based on where that pivot point is now, when we hit end, it aligns it with the ground very well. If you delete that from your world, if you grab this again and pull this back out, you'll see that that change is there for you. So no need to worry about having to do that over and over. I'm going to go ahead and do this for a few more items. I will fast forward this part of the video, but it's the same routine over and over. Once again, this could be fixed in Blender. There are other ways to do pivot points. This is just what I did the other day, so I wanted to share with you how to do that on the various assets you may come across in your game dev journey. There you go. Most of those are reset. As you can see, majority of them I just put center bottom for ease because that's good enough for what I'm doing today. With the exception of these couple branches. I know that when I pull these out and start working with them, I know I'm going to want them to kind of naturally pivot from this opening here on the end. So I did kind of manually adjust those. Like I said before, crew, there are other ways to deal with the pivot points. But this is reality of game dev. Sometimes you just stick with the tools you have or what you know. So this is why I decided to show these to you this way. Now let's add some chaos fracturing. Drag out the first pumpkin. I'm going to go up here where it says modeling mode. I'm going to go down to fracture. The shortcut key for that is Shift+6. On this, with chaos fracturing, you can do multiple layers of chaos fracturing, and we'll go over how to add some of those in a minute. And one thing to keep in mind though is performance. While it may look cool to do multiple layers of fracturing and then have your pieces able to explode again when you shoot them, just keep in mind the more you add to the screen, the more taxing it is for your game. With the pumpkin selected, I'm going to hit new, and then I'm going to create a folder underneath of pumpkins and just call this fractures. Going to go ahead and create the geometry collection. I'm just going to leave the default name in there for now. You're going to see this turn gray. What this has done is added its own material on here to show us the various layers. So I'm going to give this a minute for the layer to compile. So once we have this, it's kind of ugly, but it'll work for now. So what I'm going to do is on the left side, if I click on uniform, these are the different types of fracturing that you can do. After a moment, you'll see where it's going to split on the screen. There is the uniform, there's clustered, as you can see that adds a lot more lines on here. There's radial, which in this case is from the bottom. Oops, undo that. And there's a few others too. If you want uniform slices, you can do that. And there's ways to adjust all of that. So for this one, I'm going to choose cluster. On the left side, you have your different settings for this. So let me slow the mouse down. So as you can see, there's a lot of fractures in there. I don't know if we need quite that many for our pumpkin. So on the left side, we're going to come over minimum number of clusters. I'm going to make that say 4. Max is 8. 2 per minimum slices per cluster 2 is okay. 30. If I crank that up, you can see it can get really messy. But like I said, that's kind of hard in performance. So if I want, I'm okay with bigger pieces on the screen. So let's click into that, let's say 15. These are your distances. And if you hover over that, it will give you an explanation of each one of these. And these will change the shape even further on here. So you can really fine tune all of this. And like I said before, you can layer your clustering. So then once we have that, we can select one of these and add additional layers. I'm not going to do that for this demo. And there's some really good documentation on the Unreal site. I'll try to remember to link that in the description. The other thing we want to do is under materials for the internal material. So when these pieces slice off, there's going to be new edges showing. It asks what kind of material you want on there. Now you can go make another one. I'm just going to leave it at the pumpkin orange like we had it. If you wanted to get more detail on your objects, you could do a lighter color inside of there or a completely different material and texture. I'm going to leave everything else at default. I'm going to hit fracture. So now that we've done this, if you look on the right side, you'll see all the different pieces that this will split into. If I come back up to the top and hit explode amount, I can then see roughly what this is going to look like. Like I said before, for me, for this game, I think that's pretty good. I'm not going to worry about shooting the additional pieces and causing them to break even further. But if you wanted to, you could click on just this particular one, choose a uniform style or planar slices, whatever you want to do, and hit fracture. Again, this will create a sub collection. I'm not going to do that. I think I'm good with the way everything else looks right here. Just going to make sure I save this. Now that we have fracturing set up, if I click off the pumpkin, you're going to notice all the different colors on here. Let me get my camera out of the way. So if I start and play the game right now, we're not going to be able to break the pumpkin, and you're going to notice that all those different colors still show. And obviously that's not what we want. If I shoot it, nothing happens. If I run into it, it moves, I can shoot it, but it's not breaking like we would expect it to. So I'm going to stop the game. Go back over to the pumpkin. I'm going to select that, and there's a couple different things we're going to do. So we want to come down here and scroll down or search for bone. It's under chaos physics. We want to uncheck show bone colors. If I click off of that, you're going to see our original material is now applied. I'll click on that. The other thing we want to do is turn on auto activate. This will make sure that this game object is awake and functioning the way we are going to expect it to when the game starts. The other thing we want to do is I'm going to clear that search, make sure the pumpkin is selected. I'm going to scroll down underneath of damage. I'm going to open that up, and you're going to see a section called damage threshold with 3 array elements in here. And you see those very large numbers. That is the amount of damage that the pumpkin needs to take. However that is applied through the physics, interactions, items like that. So I think what I'm going to do is, just for now, I'm going to turn this way down. So let's do like 350. Let's do 150 and 75. Let's go ahead and save everything. It's been a little bit. Start the game. We'll run over there right quick, and we'll notice that the pumpkin is collapsed already under its own weight. Obviously, that's not something we want either, but we can see that there are particles in the screen, and we can step on them, and they do kind of mess with the character. So we'll fix those collision interactions here in a moment. On these pumpkins, if you want, you can modify the one that's in the world, or if you come down and double click these, you'll open this up and you'll see a property matrix where you can go in and change multiple things at the same time. It's a little nicer than scrolling through the little properties window on the side next to your map. I'm going to come down through here and I'm going to change a few things. So right now, a lot of the physics-based stuff does take mass into account. And right now, as you see, we have mass as density selected. So I'm going to uncheck that. If we want, we can step at a time. Check this out. I'm going to go ahead and move the pumpkin closer to the player start, just so we don't have to walk so far every time. So as you can see right there, it still fell apart. So I'm going to come back to the property matrix. The next thing I want to change, if we come down here, we do see that the mass is set to 2,500 units. That's a lot for a pumpkin. So let's change it to 10. Let's give that a go. Go ahead and hit save. Going to go ahead and test the game. As we can see, the pumpkin no longer falls apart initially. Our gun still doesn't affect it, but if we run into it, we shot it clear off the screen. Welcome to Chaos Physics. You will get a lot of weird situations like that until you get your items set up. Let's test that again and see if we do the same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to bump into the pumpkin. Okay, didn't happen that time, but as you can see, just our right does start to break it apart and then makes it applicable for the bullet that we're shooting out to then breaking it apart. Let's fix the issue with the player freaking out when we step on the pumpkin. Come back up the outliner. The character fell off of the map, so I'm going to bring it back up here by the pumpkin. Actually, since we are in the fracturing mode, let's go ahead and just set up our other pumpkin right quick, and then we'll work on the character. So we are good with this pumpkin, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it off the screen. I'm going to drag out our next one. Going to come up the left side. Same thing, we're going to click new. I'm going to choose our fracture folder. I'm just going to leave the default naming. Move in a little closer to the pumpkin here. Last one we did clustering. This one, let's do a radial maybe. For this one, I'm going to come down to radial steps. I'm going to increase that to 8. So we get a few more slices in there. If I come above the pumpkin, you can see there's quite a bit going on. I don't know if I want to keep this one or not, but let's experiment with it here for a moment. So I'm going to go ahead and look at my other settings right quick. Angular steps. Do that one at 10. So we can get some more in there. Let's go ahead and hit fracture. Give that just a moment. I'm going to come up to my explode amount. I'm going to see what that looks like. Leave that all the way out. I'm going to move around and just kind of look at the pieces. It's not as uniform as I thought it would be. So maybe we'll go ahead and leave this pumpkin this way. So I'm going to bring that back down. All right, now I'm going to come over on the right side, and just like we did before, I'm going to uncheck show bone color. So our pumpkin will look somewhat normal. I'm also going to auto activate our pumpkin. I'm also going to go ahead and go into the fractures folder. I'm going to double click our new pumpkin. I'm going to go down and make some of the same settings changes for this one. So I'm going to uncheck massless density. I'm going to move this down to, I think it was 10. Then I'm going to come down to damage. I'm going to open the damage threshold, and I'm going to change this for now to 300, 150, and 75. And we can play with these values more later after we get our blueprints for the pumpkin setup and some damage occurring. Go ahead and save this. We're going to close both of these. I'm going to go ahead and play, test the game right quick. I can see the pumpkin did not collapse under its own weight. I can push the pumpkin, and it is responding to physics. So for now, that's good enough for us. I'm going to test that one more time. Apparently we need to work on the damage amounts for that pumpkin a little bit, but we'll get to that shortly. Let's go ahead and make some changes to our player so we can get that set up so this gun isn't so loud and works a little better. So right now, part of the problem we're having with the gun, I don't know if you noticed earlier, when we shot the pumpkin, the bullet just kind of passed through. A couple different reasons for that. Some of that is the collisions we have set up right now, but part of that too is the small size and speed in which the bullet is moving. So if I come back up here, I go back to selection mode, close chaos fracturing. Let's go down to first person, go to blueprints. Let's go ahead and open up the weapon component. I'm going to do a couple changes in here right quick. First thing we want to do is I want to come in to where it says play sound at location after we have first person projectile. I'm going to open that up. I'm going to change this to about 0.3 because for me that sound is way too loud every time the gun fires. Personal preference. Let's come in, grab the gun right quick. And it's definitely quieter than what it was. All right, so we can go ahead and collapse that again. If we come back over here, let's open up the projectile. Go to the viewport so we can see it. I'm going to click on the sphere, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that like 0.3 all the way around, and just obnoxious. Obviously, this isn't what you would want in your game. It's not realistic size, but as we can see, that's a lot bigger than it comes out. But now, if we test the game now, grab our gun. Let's go over and interact with our pumpkin just to make sure it's awake. So now if I fire that big bullet out there, you'll notice it takes care of it every time. Obviously, we have to tone down some things on the physics here. But this is game dev, folks. You make a change, you test it, and you... So let's test that again right quick. I'm going to come over and make sure the pumpkin's awake. Again. Now we're not. Obviously, we still got a few bugs to work out. So let's go back. Before this, I don't want to use the physics of this projectile and rely on that for smashing these pumpkins. I would want to definitely be a lot more consistent for the play experience on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to weapon component. And what I'm going to do is let's close the projectile. We can put that back, but we're not going to use that anymore. So I'm just going to close that. On the weapon component, I'm going to come in, I'm going to look for this input action shoot. I'm going to pull out this triggered. I'm going to come down here underneath everything, and I'm going to look for line trace by channel. So obviously we don't want to spawn this projectile anymore, so I'm going to hold Alt and I'm going to break these connections, and I'm going to take my line trace by channel. I'm going to go ahead and hook it up because we still want to play the sound of the gun firing. Since we don't want to trace and inspect everything in the game, what I'm going to do is set up a custom trace channel for this to look at. Right now, by default, you have visibility and camera. So I'm going to come up to edit. We're going to go to project settings. If you come under engine and collision, you'll find trace channels. If you don't remember that, you can always come at the top and search for trace channel. We're going to create a new trace channel. We're going to just call this pumpkin. And by default, everything in the game right now, I want to ignore this, and then we will individually turn on the only things we want to interact on this channel. That way you don't cause a bunch of unnecessary issues by adding a new trace channel, depending upon where you are in your development process. Go ahead and accept. So you can see we've added our pumpkin channel and everything will ignore it. So we can go ahead and close that. We'll hit this drop down. As you can see, things aren't here, so I'm going to go ahead and compile. If I hit this again, we'll see our new pumpkin channel in here. So we're going to need to tell it where to start and end. A lot of what we need is already on the screen. We just need to interact with it. So right now you can see up above when they were setting up the rifle to fire the projectile, they have the get socket location where they're adding their offset and rotation to it. So I'm just going to grab from this node right here. I'm going to use that as our start position. So we're going to start our trace at the end of our gun. So from here, what we want to do is come over here to the camera manager. And we want to get the forward vector. And then from here, we're going to want to know like how far we want to allow the gun to look out to shoot the pumpkins. So right now, let's go ahead and add a variable. I'm going to call this ray length. This is going to be of type float. Go ahead and compile so I can set the default trace length to, let's say, 2500. And we can adjust that later on. So let's grab our array length. I'm going to hold down control so I can do a get on that. Then we want to multiply this by our array length. Then we're going to want to add that to the starting position. So I'm going to come up here to their add node. I'm going to create another add node right here. Add our multiply value to that. And that's going to be our end position. For right now, let's turn on debug draw type. Have that just be persistent. I'm going to go ahead and compile and save. And we're going to test right quick just to make sure we can see that. So right now, we see the line trace coming out from the gun. We see that it only goes a certain length. And right now, it doesn't understand this as a pumpkin. And we'll worry about that in a moment. Matter of fact, let's get the fracture component off the screen because we're not going to be using those directly in the game. So we have our line trace running. Let's go ahead and turn off the debug draw type since we know that works. There's a couple more things we're going to want to do to the gun, but let's go create our pumpkins so we have something to shoot at first before we finish this out. That way it'll make testing a little easier. So let's go ahead and come back up to our blueprints folder. We're going to right click, create blueprint class. This is going to be type actor. I'm going to call this BP Big Pumpkin. I'm going to go ahead and open that up, dock that to my main window. I'm going to save this. So with this open, if you remember when we created our fractures, so I'm going to go back to that folder right quick just so we can see it. So I'm going to open assets, I'm going to open pumpkins. Under our fractures, you'll notice when it created this and saved this data, these are of type geometry collection. So what we want to do on our blueprint is we want to come up here and we want to add a geometry collection. I'm just going to call this Big Pumpkin 1 for lack of better naming convention. I'm going to come over on the right side and you're going to look for the collection, rest collection right here. I'm going to hit this drop down and we're going to choose this first one right here. Back our camera up and there we go. Much like a lot of other assets, these are added in at the wrong angle. So just so this lines up with everything else we're going to add to it based on the way it came in, I'm going to go ahead and rotate this on the Z-axis by -90. Something I added to my game, I think that was fun, was the ability for this to turn and look at the player. So let's go ahead and set that up too while we're in here. So I'm going to add a sphere collision. And I'm going to go ahead and call it sphere collision, but I do not want this as a child of the pumpkin. So I'm going to move that up to default scene root and say attach. I'm going to come down here to variables. I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to call this sphere radius. So I can change the size of this at runtime. I don't have to open the blueprint every time. So I'm going to make that of type float. I'm going to go ahead and compile. I'm going to make that 250 for a default value, just so I know that there's something around it. Let's see here. All right, so on that, sphere collision. While this will be controlled from our variable, I do want to come in instead of 250 right there, just so I can see that right now. A couple other things I want to do to the pumpkin is add our stem. So let's add a static mesh component. And I forgot to select the pumpkin because I do want this to be a child of it. So I'm just going to drag that down here. I'm going to look for stem. let's do this first one. Go ahead and move that. Place this in here just real quick so it looks good. If we want, we can maybe rotate it back because I've never seen a stem quite that straight before. There we go. And what carved pumpkin would be complete without a candle? So let's click on Big Pumpkin. Let's add another static mesh. And under static mesh, let's look for our candle. And then obviously we want to do the candle lit, which for me is the second one. So I'm going to move my camera so I can see. Now, the way this was imported and the way that the flame works for this particular type of candle, as you can see, are those two flat plates. So depending upon the rotation of your candle, you may not see the flame at a certain spot, the way it comes in. So I found if I come in and I rotate that until it looks good, and then I'll just kind of float around my pumpkin and just make sure I can kind of see it from all the angles. We will worry about the strength of the candle here in a little bit. All right, so that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and compile and save. A couple things we want to do is for our pumpkin is I want to click on the root object up here, BP Big Pumpkin. And then I want to look for tag because we are going to use tags later on for our scoring. So I want to do pumpkin, all lowercase on the tag. It is important to remember exactly the way you type this, capitalization and everything. On the left side, I'm going to click on Big Pumpkin 1, and then I'm going to look for collision. So I'm going to come down underneath here for collision presets. This is obviously set to custom already. The type is destructible, but obviously this is a pumpkin, so we don't want it to ignore the pumpkin channel. We want it to block on the pumpkin channel. And I think the other thing we want to do is ignore pawn, so our character cannot be interfered by the various pieces. So for now, let's compile and save. Let's come back to our map. Let's go ahead and drag our blueprint pumpkin out there. I'm going to put him on screen. I'm going to up a little bit, and if you hit end, it will align that to the ground for you. I want to go ahead and rotate him so I can see him. And I'm going to go ahead and test the game, and there's our pumpkin. It did not collapse on itself. Obviously, we don't have any interaction from our guns yet, but we can run into it. All right, excellent. So let's go back to our weapon component. So from here, what we want to do is after it shoots, we run the line trace, we play the sound. Obviously, we still want to play the animation montage and everything else. We're going to, from line trace by channel, if we did hit something, so I'm going to pull that out for the return value. I'm going to press B and get a branch. So after the animation plays, so I'm going to drag that execution node down here and hook that up. And you can double click these lines and add some reroute nodes and make those lines a little cleaner for you. So if we did hit something, I'm going to pull from this out hit array so we can break that and we can get the individual pieces of information. Zoom in on that for you. So if we did hit something, I want to know if the hit actor has tag of pumpkin. And like I said before, type this exactly like you did or go copy and paste it from your other area. So if we did hit something and it does have the tag of actor, so I'm going to pull from that once again, hold my mouse down and hit B. At this point, we want to interact with the pumpkin, but I'm not sure how we're going to do that since it is a different object. So Since we're going to have multiple types of pumpkins in here, it doesn't make sense to try and cast to each individual type. So what we're going to do is add a interface. So I'm going to come back over to blueprints. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to blueprint and then down to blueprint interface. I'm going to call this BPI pumpkin. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. With our one and only function in here, we want the pumpkin to explode, so let's have explode. I'm going to go ahead and compile and save, and I'm going to go ahead and close this. Back in our BP Big Pumpkin, I'm going to click on Class Settings, clear my filter, go down to Interfaces. I'm going to add our BPI Pumpkin. If it doesn't show up, if you don't have the interfaces piece on the left right away, you can go ahead and compile and save, and that should show up. So I'm going to go out to over to our event graph. And there's a couple different things we want to do. So before we forget, actually, let's go to the construction script and let's set up our sphere radius so that can be controlled at design time. We don't have to open this back up. So I'm going to pull sphere collision out here so I can get a reference to that from the left side here. Pull this out, and we want to set the sphere radius. I'm going to hook up that execution pin. And then I want to get our sphere radius variable and just drop that right there. Go ahead and clean these up a little bit. So if we compile and save, on the sphere radius, I'm going to go ahead and open that eyeball right there. And as you can see, this construction pin, every time we make a change, will kind of fire off. And the reason I'm doing it this way is if I come back to the map and we can see our, put some contrast behind that for you. We can see our sphere radius right here. So what I can do is I can click on this object, clear my search filter, and right here we have sphere radius. So if all of a sudden I want this to be 750, I can do this right here at design time. I don't need to change it, and it can be individual for each pumpkin. So depending upon what you do, it just gives you a lot of options to work with. So if I make this pumpkin bigger, obviously his 750 for him is a lot larger since this will work with scale. Obviously we have a few things to change if we want our pumpkins to be that big. So I'm going to go ahead and reset his scale. I'm going to come back over to BP Pumpkin. I'm going to go to Viewport. I'm going to click on Stem. For now, I'm going to remove the stem, and we'll come back and add that back in later so it doesn't cause us problems right now. So with the stem gone, let's go over to the event graph. So there's several things we want to add in here. Chaos fracturing is a little different than your standard hit functions on a regular static mesh, that sort of thing. Obviously, we don't want to count every little piece that's been hit for this particular game that we're building. Maybe you want to in a different type. I don't want to track what the other pieces have hit, those sort of things. So what we're going to do on this one is we're going to implement a couple different items. First, let's explode the pumpkin. So for right now, I'm going to just get rid of these nodes that are on the screen. I want to double click our event explode. For these pumpkins, there's a couple different ways I've played to imply damage to them. And a lot of tutorials or training that you'll see is they will have the weapon actually implementing the damage. And in most cases, that makes sense. I want to show you a little bit different way that can handle this. And instead of the weapon calculating damage, for something like this where it just needs to explode, we can have the item itself create the impulses and the damage. So for this, since we're using chaos physics, I want to create something called a master field. We'll come back to event explode here in a moment. Let's go over back to our blueprints directory. I want to right click. I want to go to blueprint. I'm going to come down here and expand all classes. And what we're going to look for is a master field. So right here, you will find a FS master field. I'm going to go ahead and hit select, and I'm going to call this BP master field. And I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And as you're going to see, the reason we chose this particular parent class is right away, it comes with our sphere volume collisions and a lot of other items needed to create that chaos physics sort of event that we're going to look for to explode these pumpkins. On these master fields, one of the nice things they have set in here is if you turn on debug, you will see on the bottom they have a lot of these text fields. So you can see right away chaos field, if it's active, the strain, the radial magnitude, all this other stuff right here. So while you have this in your game design view, you can see this right on the screen. If you have too many of them or it gets annoying, you can turn the debug off. So a couple things we want to do on this one, since I'm going to call them at the pumpkin, I want this to right away provide its damage and information the moment it's spawned or created. So I'm going to go ahead and say use tick on this. We're going to change delay amount to 0.1 because we want it to go off almost instantly. If you hit linear physics type, there's a lot of different items in this dropdown. If you go check the Unreal documentation, you can get some deeper understanding of the various types. For me, I want to choose linear velocity because I want my pumpkins to kind of explode and go outwards from the center point of impact. Angular physics type, same thing. You can do field noise. I'm going to use angular velocity. Scroll down and look at some of the other options here. Fall off type linear is good. Noise scale is good. There's a lot of options in here, so I do recommend you check the documentation if you want to really fine tune this. A lot of these by default are good. For field settings here. Under field settings, I want to open up the apply linear and angular velocities. Take a look at those. Real vector's good. Let's turn it up, say 900 for now. Just add a little more oomph to it. I do want to use some torque. 8's fine. You can come in and fine tune these after we get them in the game too. Obviously, we don't want to see this in the game at all, so I'm going to say hidden in-game and actor is hidden in-game. We can see them at design time. I just don't want to see them necessarily at runtime. And that'll work for this, so I'm going to go ahead and say compile and save. And if we come back over to BP Big Pumpkin, so on the explode event, we want to spawn an actor from class, and we want that to be our master field that we just created. So I'm going to say BP master field. So for the location on this, the transform, obviously we want it to happen right here at the pumpkin because that's what we're in right now. So we want to get the world location. We're just going to go ahead and hook this up and let the default conversion happen for that. So I'll go ahead and straighten these up. So when we get hit or when this explodes, we don't necessarily want to leave our candle behind. I think I forgot to rename that. So I'm going to hit F2 and call that candle. So from here, I want to know if the candle is valid, because I don't know how many times this is going to hit. I don't know what kind of damage is going to occur when the pieces are flying around, that sort of thing. I chose the wrong one there. So let's come from here and say is valid, question mark, not function. You got to watch that, it happens. So if this is valid, we want to destroy component candle. And you can either leave that reference there, or you can delete that and just pull from here, just to keep your code a little cleaner. Up to you. Then from there, I want to delay for about 1 second maybe, just so things have time to complete. I'm going to pull from here and I'm going to say destroy actor. Put some reroute nodes in here and clean this up right quick. After our pumpkin is collapsed, if the candle is already destroyed, we want to continue anyway with destroying the rest of the pumpkin after a small delay. So I'm going to go ahead and take the is not valid from the candle check and put this over here. And if you wanted to add the stem back, you could do something very, very similar with that. I'm not going to worry about that right now. So let's compile and save. Now that we have our explode event set up, let's go back over to our weapon component. So we know it's a pumpkin that we've hit. So we want to come out and we want to call the explode message on that target. So I'm going to pull from hit actor. Go ahead and plug that in. From there, let's add some effects because the pumpkin just exploding isn't cool enough. So let's do spawn emitter at location. And this is why we added our starter content. So I want to come back over here. So the location of the hit, which would be the location of the pumpkin. That's what we want to use. And then for here, let's use this explosion. So for this explosion, this comes with the effects. It also comes with the sound. So if we hit the magnifying glass, it will take us out to where the explosion is. From there, I want to go up to audio. And then we've got a couple different types of explosion sounds in here. Okay. These sound pretty similar to me. But there is our explosion cue right here. So if we open that up, you can kind of take a look and see what's going on here. And what it does is it randomly chooses between explosion 1 and explosion 2, modulates that a little bit for the output. You have your volume multiplier up here, your standard pitch multiplier, and several other things. So if you haven't spent much time with these audio cues, do go ahead and look those up. They're fabulous for your game for adding different effects and selecting between sounds and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and go back to our weapon component. Now we've spawned the explosion. Let's do a play sound at location. 2D sound won't work. Obviously, we want to play the sound where the pumpkin actually is. So we want to do this, and let's look for our explosion cue. Right there. I'm going to go ahead and hit that drop down. We want to use the same location, so I'm going to put a reroute node right there. I'm going to pull from that reroute node to the location. Put a couple more in here just so it's a little cleaner. Volume multiplier, once again, I personally think some of these are too loud, so I'm going to turn that down to about 0.3. And really you can collapse that if you wanted to, up to you. So at this point, let's compile and save and go test our game. Look at that. We got our first pumpkin making a mess. Okay, so let's test this a few more times. I'm going to move this guy over here and hit Control D and duplicate him just so we have a couple different pumpkins out here. These two I'm going to leave close. This one I'm going to make further away for a reason. Let's go ahead and test this. So if I shoot the first one, pretty good. Go. So I wasn't sure if those two would cause damage to one another, and that's kind of what I was testing. So let's try that again right quick. Let's come over here. Let's shoot this direction maybe. Nope. As of right now, we're okay. Sometimes they can do that, so keep that in mind when you're placing these chaos physics values. They will interact with one another sometimes and cause additional damage you may not be expecting. So there we go. Glorious mess of pumpkins on our screen. We're making progress. Okay, so I'm done with the explosion queue. And for right now, the master field. Let's come back to BP Big Pumpkin. So in my testing, I noticed through this that if I have a lot of pumpkins on the screen and I start shooting through them very quickly, the BP master fields that we add to the screen don't always clean themselves up like I want them to. So there's a couple different things I added. First, I went back into the BP master field blueprint. And if yours opens like this, you can hit open full blueprint editor. And they'll do that when you don't have anything in the event graph or no other custom logic. So for me, I got rid of these two, did a right click, and I added a custom event. And I just called it self-destruct. On this, I just did a delay. And like I said, we can't see these on the screen or during the gameplay, so I don't mind if they hang out for a little bit, but I don't want them there indefinitely. So I'm going to leave that on the screen for, say, 30 seconds. It should give this ample time to do everything it needs. Honestly, 15 or 20 seconds is probably fine, but better safe than sorry a little bit. And it's going to take very few resources for that to just sit there for 30 seconds and then disappear. So after that, I want to destroy actor. And then from our event begin play, let's just say self-destruct. That's all we need to do. Let's compile and save on that. I'm going to go ahead and close that. So right now, let's add a comment to this. So I'm going to highlight everything, press C, and say explode pumpkin. Let's go ahead and give that a little bit of a blue color. I'm going to save my blue color by whatever I selected, dragging that up here. Say okay. Now the other thing I want to do is, since we spawned that master field as part of the pumpkin, I want to right click on this pumpkin and I want to go to add event, and we're going to look for the on chaos removal event. So whenever the pumpkin fades away, and we'll go into those settings here in a little bit, I want to come in, and once again, I want to do pretty much the same code that we did in the master BP. So you can do a custom event again, or you could just add it from here. I like to keep mine very clean, so it's obvious what I'm doing sometimes, because I'll admit I forget. I'm going to say self-destruct. Once again, we're going to add a delay. And then we want to destroy the actor. So this delay, let's say 20 seconds is ample. Could do 30 like we did on the other one, just to make sure between the two something gets cleaned up. This is probably overkill. I just like to make sure that these are gone out of memory. Like I said, I have had experience in the past over a couple different games of these fields just kind of hanging in memory a little bit. So from here, I want to say self-destruct. Just for consistency, let's make this 30 so everything matches. Okay. So let's highlight this. Press C, and let's say, make sure field cleared from memory. Once again, come up here, little color shortcut, color good. With that done, let's make the pumpkin turn and look at the player once he's inside of the field. This isn't hard, but there's a few nodes we need to get a hold of to make sure we turn in the right direction. So on the sphere, let's right click this. I want to add event. On component begin overlap. And if you don't want to use the right click menu, if you click on this and scroll down all the way towards the bottom on the right side, you'll have the same list of events over here. So on component begin overlap, I'm going to go ahead and add that. Let's add a variable called look at player question mark. I'm going to make this a Boolean because maybe I don't want all of them to do it. Maybe I only want some pumpkins to do that. By default, I'm going to have it true. So on the overlap, if we do want to look at the player, add a branch in there. That way we can just turn this off altogether and not have to worry about it. Let's take the other actor that did overlap with us and let's say cast to character. So I don't necessarily need the full reference to the first person player. So cast to character is just fine. I just need to know where they are. And I want to promote that to variable. And I'm going to rename that to character ref, just so I have it. So because we want to do this on a loop, regardless of where the character is moving, once the character enters our collision field, he will constantly be in it. So the begin overlap won't fire again. So what I want to do is set up a timer to constantly look until he leaves our overlap. So from there, we want to set timer by event. I'm going to set that up, and then I want to make sure I promote that to a variable, and I want to call this my timer handle. That way I can reference this later and shut this timer down once the pumpkin is destroyed or the character leaves the overlap. So I'm going to pull from event. I'm going to click on this. I'm going to add a custom event and just call it look at player. So every time this event fires, and we can do this on whatever interval you want. I find 0.01 works pretty well. And I do want this to be looping. So every 0.01 seconds, we will come in, look at the player, and perform this code. So from there, let's set actor rotation. Obviously, the target is going to be self. But from here, there's several other things we need to do to figure out where to look and get this new rotation. So let's make ourselves a little bit of room. So let's get the actor location. So this would be the location of the pumpkin we're working with right now. Then we also want our character's location. So I'm going to hold control, drag that out and get a reference, get our variable, which is a reference to the character. And once again, get actor location. And from here, what we want to do is there's a node called find look at rotation. We have the location, but now we need the rotation of the pumpkin. So let's do get actor rotation. There's a great little interpolate node. Called rinterpt2. Forgot the name there momentarily. Apologize for that. So we have our current rotation and our find looked at rotation is going to become our target. And since we want this to operate kind of smoothly, let's pull from there and do get world delta seconds. That way we can kind of operate frame independently. So all of that we can then plug into our new rotation value. But we don't want to do the entire thing. So let's right click, split that pin structure. Let's go ahead and split this one. And we just want to do the Z because our pumpkin's not rolling forward or going side to side. We just want to spin it so the face looks at our character. Okay, I know that was a lot. So let's review that just for a moment. So what we're going to do is once our character does the begin overlap, We want to make sure that we do want to look at the player, and that's controlled by our variable on the left-hand side. Default is true. From there, we want to cast this to character. We want to set a reference to that so we can use it later on. And then we want to set a timer by event. That timer is going to go off every 0.01 seconds, and it is going to loop. I am going to keep a reference to the handle on that, so I can come back to this timer and shut it down later on so it just doesn't run and run. So that timer is going to call this custom event that we made called look at player. That player is going to set that event is going to set the actor rotation, and that rotation is going to be determined by the pumpkin's rotation compared to the player's location, and we're going to get that rotation value, and then we will interpolate between the two with smoothing on the delta seconds there. So let's go ahead and comment that code. Call that look at player. And then what we can do with all of that set up to turn and look at the player, we can come up to our sphere collision. We can add event on component end overlap. And simply all we want to do with this is clear and invalidate timer by handle. And that handle is going to be the timer handle reference that we created earlier. And that's it. That quick. I'm just going to be consistent and comment this and say, stop looking at player. So let's go ahead and compile and save. Let's test this out right quick. So if we come over here at the side, oh, we can see that they're trying, but the rotation isn't happening. So let's take a look as to why that might be. I think I know right away. So let's come back to our pumpkin. Let's click on our candle. And let's come down to collision on our candle, because we just want our candle to ride inside the pumpkin. We don't really want it to cause problems. So let's change this to no collision for our candle. Compile and save. Let's go ahead and start this again. And now, oh, they just kind of snapped to place that first time, but it seems to be pretty smooth after that until they explode. All right, let's test that again one more time. Try to stay outside of their arc for a minute until I get behind them. Ooh, very fast. And then we just kind of lerp after that. Let's go back over to our Beaky pumpkin. And right here on our interpolation, obviously we didn't set any delay on this. So what we're going to do, let's change this to 1. Obviously we don't want our pumpkins just snapping around like that. Maybe you do. It's your game. Do what you want. For me, I want it to be slow and creepy. So let's move that over. Let's come back over here again. And that is more the effect I was looking for. So now, as long as we are within range of our collision sphere, those pumpkins will just follow me until they're damaged. As you can see, when we shot this one, then this one became damaged and isn't acting quite right. He doesn't want to look at us anymore. I think we've hurt his feelings. All right. Let's file save all since it's been a little bit and we don't want to lose our work. So one of the things I want to do right now is make sure everything is getting itself cleaned up like it's supposed to. That way, if I have a lot of these on the screen, I don't need to worry about as much I don't need to worry as much about performance. So right now, if you notice, if we come in, add these to the screen, and if we wait, these pieces don't go away. They just sit here. So what we can do is stop playing the game. I'm going to go back over to our assets where we saved our geometry collection fracture information. I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to go ahead and scroll down under removal. So right here, scale and removal is turned on. That's just a fun effect. I like it, so I'm going to leave that there, but I'm going to say remove on sleep. So that way when we stop interacting with them, they will start to fade off of the screen. So for right now, what I want to do, 5 and 10 seconds, maybe okay. I want to do it a little quicker, so I'm going to say random interval between 2 and 5 seconds. The removal duration, let's make that pretty quick, 1.5 and 3. And then let's make sure we have this turned on, the slow moving as sleep. When some of these chaos fractures, if they're leaning against a wall or something, they will sit there and vibrate a little bit, and that movement will not allow it to go to sleep if this is turned off. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and leave that threshold around 1 at its default setting. So now if we go ahead and save this, go to the first person map, and we'll test this again. So now we shoot these and we wait. You know, somewhere between 3 to 5 seconds, these pieces will start to fade away. And to me, that's a lot nicer effect and keeps everything kind of cleaned up. So if we wait just a little bit longer, I'm going to hit Shift F1. Almost a couple pieces are still there. But if we wait our 30 seconds, I believe it was, the pumpkins should then disappear off the screen when they clean themselves up. I'll go ahead and fast forward this part of the video for you. Looks like our pumpkin did not clean itself up, so let's take a look at that right quick. So come in, highlight on the pumpkin itself. Let's make sure. So let's go ahead and make sure that the break and removal events are fired. That way, I forgot to check that earlier. That way our component up here on chaos removal event will start the self-destruct sequence. Go ahead and test that again right quick. Let's go ahead and wait. And we will watch these 2 pumpkins right here in the outliner. And there we go. The pumpkins have cleaned themselves up. They are now out of the game, remove themselves from the outliner and out of the game's memory. Excellent. So I believe we have our pumpkin working pretty well. So now let's add something to the screen so we can see where we're shooting and then work on score for our game. I'm going to come back up to my asset folder, and on my desktop, I have a gray cross icon that we can use. I'm going to go ahead and import that. I will leave a link to that in the description for you to download. I'm going to open that up. I'm going to make sure that this drop down is on user interface. We'll go ahead and save that. Then we can close it. We're done with the pumpkin fracture for a minute. Come back over to our blueprint folder. I'm going to go and create myself a new folder inside of here, and I'm going to call it UI. Right click, I'm going to go to user interface and down to widget blueprint. I'm just going to create a user widget. I'm going to call this WBP per widget blueprint and main HUD. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. On this, we will use this for displaying our icon. For the rifle, we will display our score on here too. So let's go ahead and add a canvas panel. We'll go ahead and drag that out. And this is going to be the main part of our screen. From there, I want to add a image. Go ahead and drag that down onto the canvas panel. I'm just going to rename it Gun Sight. From this, with that selected, I'm going to hit the anchors drop down. I'm going to put that right in the middle. Then I'm going to reset the position on the X and the Y. In the alignment, I want to put that 0.5 and 0.5. On this, for that little icon, it is an 18 by 18 square. So if we change the X and the Y size, we come down to brush, expand that, and just look for our gray cross. It's kind of gray and white. So there that is, right in the center of the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and compile and save. And we will come back and add our score box and everything else later. Let's go ahead and get the HUD added to the screen. Let's go ahead and go back to our content drawer. I'm going to go down to first person blueprints. I'm going to open the first person character. Right up here at the top, I'm going to right click and do a event begin play. From here, we want to create a widget. Go ahead and zoom in on that so we can see it. From here, I want my WBP main HUD. I want to keep a reference to this for later on, so I'm going to go ahead and set that and just name it main HUD. And then from there, once we have that reference, I went ahead and add it to the viewport. And the target is going to be from the variable we just set. Let's go ahead and compile and save. And if we start a game, we see that we have our icon right in the middle. Now, if you wanted to add additional logic to only show that when you have the rifle picked up, you could work this into the rifle component. There's a couple other different things you could do. For me, I'm just going to leave it on the screen full time, since 99% of the time we will have the rifle in our hand. I'm going to go ahead and close out the game. Since we have our player character open, let's go ahead and return to that. Let's just add some sprinting. I'm not going to make sprinting over complicated in this. We're sprinting or we're not. If you want to see how to set up a proper sprinting system with stamina, I have another video for that, and I'll link that on a card on the screen and put a link in the description for you. Right now, what we want to do is come over back to the first person character. I'm going to go into the input and actions folder. I'm going to right click, go to input, create a input action, and I'm going to call this IA sprint. That's all we need to do for that. I'm going to come back up one folder to the input folder. I'm going to open up the IMC default, open up mappings. I'm going to add an additional mapping on here, and I'm going to find the IA sprint that we just added. When I open that up, I'm going to hit the keyboard. I'm just going to press left shift on my keyboard to record that key. If you wanted to, you could hit the drop down, find it in here, or if you're setting everything up for a controller, you can do that. I'm just going to use the left shift for now. Go ahead and save that. That's all we need. I'm going to close it. Back on the first person character, I'm going to come down underneath. I'm going to click on the movement component. I'm going to look over here on the side. And I'm going to look for max walk speed. Right now, our max walk speed is set to 600. And then when we sprint, we're going to want to increase this. So we're going to want to remember the 600 value. So I'm going to come over, I'm going to make a couple variables. The first one I'm going to make, I'm going to call it max walk speed. And we're going to make that a float. And then I'm going to make one more. I'm going to call this max sprint speed. Gonna go ahead and compile and save so I can set the defaults on these. So for walk speed, that was 600. Sprint speed, let's try 1100 just for fun. This is a pretty simple game, so we're not going to worry too much about, like I said, stamina or realistic movement, those sort of things. We're just going to have some fun blowing up some pumpkins. So I want to right click. I'm going to choose the IA sprint that we started. On our IA sprint, I'm going to open this up. I'm going to come in the upper left. I'm going to get a reference to our character movement piece. And from here, I'm going to say set max walk speed. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste that node right away. I'm going to move it down here and set up the target on that also. So when we start pressing the button for sprinting, we're going to come up here and we're going to set our max walk speed to our sprint speed. And then when we are done or have completed our sprinting, let go of the button. We're going to come down here and we're going to reset this to our max walk speed. Like I said, there are far more complicated ways, interesting ways you can set these up. For now, I just want to sprint or not. So to get this done in one day, I didn't want to make this too complicated. So if I come in, we're walking, we're sprinting, we're walking, we're sprinting, there we go. That's working. So pretty easy. Now you can change those values as you wish. If you want to walk slower or sprint faster, it's pretty easy to go in and change those variables. File, save all. All right, let's work on some scoring. As well, it's fun to blow up pumpkins. We need an objective in our game. So right now, I think what I'm going to do for our scoring system, let's go down to first person blueprints. Let's open up the game mode. Go ahead and do a full blueprint editor. So on this one with your game mode, depending upon, you can have multiple game modes depending on which one is active at the time. You can hold some universal data that is more specific to the game and not necessarily just the level. There is a level blueprint. So if you want to do certain things like play certain music, background music for an entire level, that's a great place to do that. If there are other level specific logic like weather systems, whatever else, you would want to do that in a level blueprint. For the game mode blueprint, you can do other items such as keep score. So let's come in on this and let's start with event begin play. So on this, there's a couple things we want to keep track of, right? So let's do total pumpkins. And let's make that an integer because we're not going to track partial pumpkins, so we can use whole numbers. And let's track the destroyed pumpkins. So we're just going to leave the defaults on both of those at 0. So when we first come in on this particular game mode, let's go ahead and let's set our input mode to game only. And this will make more sense later as to why we're doing this when we add a main menu system or our windscreen, that sort of thing. So for right now, we don't want UI controls. We just want our game mode. And for the player controller, we just want to get player controller. So we have a reference to that. From there, let's grab our destroyed pumpkins. Since right now our game is just starting, I'm going to hold down Alt so I can drag out a set on that. We're going to make sure that is set to 0. That way, if we are restarting our level or coming at this from some other direction, we always make sure we reset our score to 0 when we start playing this. Now what we want to do is get all actors with tag. So if you remember earlier when we were setting up our pumpkin, we did put a tag on there of pumpkin. This way it will allow us to grab every reference in the screen or in your scene and just count them up right quick. This way you can just worry about your game design at design time, and it really doesn't matter how many pumpkins you drag out onto the screen. The scoring system will just count them at the beginning and have what it needs to operate. I like to make things very dynamic so I don't need to worry about going back and remembering to set references or hard coding them. So for right now, what we're going to do is set our total pumpkins right here. So we're going to drag that out, set the pumpkins, and we're going to take this and we're going to just get the length, and we'll just go ahead and set that value up here. And just so we can see it, I want to do a print string. And our string is just going to be the number of pumpkins. So I'll just let that auto convert. I want to make this green color and leave it on here for 5 seconds so we can see it. So for right now, let's compile and save. And like I said, this is our first person game mode. So as soon as we hit play, we see 2 in the upper corner, and that's it. We have our pumpkins. So if we come up, grab one of these pumpkins, do a Control D, put one here, Control D again, do another one here. If we hit play, we see we have 4 pumpkins. So right away, we can see that that's working. I'll shoot one just for fun and stop the game. Come back to our first person game mode. We know this is working, so we can hit Alt and just kill the execution pin for right now. So now what we need is a way to talk to the pumpkins or have the pumpkins notify the game mode every time one of them is destroyed so we can increment the score. And we don't want to do direct references necessarily between those components like that, especially with the number of pumpkins that you could potentially have on the screen. So what I want to do is I want to come back over to BP Big Pumpkin. Now remember, we have a couple different types of pumpkins in the assets, and we'll set up the other one later, but let's finish getting this one set up, and then we can duplicate this blueprint. Now we could use another interface for this, but this also seems like a good excuse to come in and use an event dispatcher. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to call this on pumpkin death. So we want to add our score. Since we're counting the pumpkins whole, we only want to add our score the first time the pumpkin breaks. So regardless of how you set up your fracture components, and if you have multiple levels, we only want to count that once. During my testing, I ended up scoring 115 out of 4 because I didn't have this implemented quite correctly. So let's go ahead and right click on the pumpkin. We're going to add an event, and that event is going to be called on break event. On chaos break event. And then what we want to know is, has the pumpkin been hit? So right here, let's create a has been hit Boolean. On save and make sure that is false by default. So let's hold down Control and drag out a reference to that. Let's get a branch. So if this has been hit, so you could do a not and reverse this logic depending upon which pin here you want to use. But the first time in, the pumpkin has not been hit. So we are then going to hold down Alt and drag out has been hit so we can set that to true so we don't count the score twice. We have that execution pin set up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to drag out our event and we're going to say call. And that's it. We're not going to do anything else. So every pumpkin, when it gets shot, is just going to call this event dispatcher, and it's the responsibility of whoever is listening to the event dispatcher to record that information. That way this pumpkin doesn't know who's listening. It doesn't know anything about game mode or anything else. So this is a great way to have that interaction between your components without actually wiring them together. If there's nobody listening to this, no errors occur. So let's go back over to our first person game mode. And what we want to do, since we are looping through each of the pumpkins anyway, let's go ahead and I'm just going to disconnect this also. I'm just going to move this out of the way for now over here. And what we want to do is, after we record the total pumpkins, let's go ahead and move this over just a little bit. Let's do a for each loop. And then our array can be the same array from the count that we did. Go ahead move this down here. I might move the length up here just so it's out of the way. So for each loop, we can come in, and there's a few different ways to do this. Since I only plan on having and only ended up with the 2 different types of pumpkins, I went ahead and just did the cast for those 2. If you have multiple types of objects that you can destroy, like pumpkins and maybe the windows or whatever else you want to add to your game, you can look at some different ways to register these events, and maybe just register everything from the tags that are used. There's a few other ways to do it. This way, I want to walk you through how to individually call each of these components so you can register to that on pumpkin death, so you understand how that works. Long way to say this isn't the most efficient code, but I want to do it this way so you fully understand how we're binding to that event and how it gets called. So right now, what we're going to do on loop body, I'm going to go ahead and try to cast to, and let's do BP underscore big pumpkin. The object is going to be this array element. If this is of type BP big pumpkin, we're going to say as big pumpkin. We're going to come up here and we're going to bind event to on pumpkin death. Where is, there it is, on pumpkin death. All right, so we'll get to the event portion of this in a moment. But for right now, we're going to come in, we're going to do this. If it is of BP big pumpkin that we've created right here, then we're going to bind to the event that we called down here for on pumpkin death. That way, the first time it has been hit, it will record that it's been hit, and then it will just blindly call this to see who's listening. So this is how we set up who has been listening. Hopefully that made sense. If it didn't, let me know in the comments, and I'm happy to create a video to go over interfaces and event bindings much further. They're excellent to understand while you're creating games. So right now, if this cast failed, then it could be the other type of pumpkin that we have. So let's go ahead and create that right now. So if I come back to, I'm going to go ahead and, I hit compile because we didn't set up our event. We'll come back to this in a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and come back to first person map. I'm going to go to blueprints. Since we have our big pumpkin set up with all of our events, all we really need to do is hit Control D. I'm going to name this, let's say, Big Smile Pumpkin, or whatever you want to call it. So this one, I'm going to come into here. I'm going to come over to the rest collection. I'm going to choose the other pumpkin that we used. If you go to viewport, slow the camera down, you can see that we have our other pumpkin, that the candle is in there and working. All of that. You can even click on this F2 and name this Smile Pumpkin if you want. And if you come to your event graph, if you remember we had a reference to the pumpkin, it does automatically update that for you. So compile and save. We have no errors on this. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'm going to go back to first person game mode. And if the cast failed, then I'm going to cast to BP Smile Pumpkin. And as BP Smile Pumpkin, if it is that, same thing, we're going to bind event on pumpkin death. After we bind to the event, we don't need to do anything else. If this cast failed, then we're not worried about what other type of object that would be, though it is concerning that we're only looking at things with the pumpkin tag, but for right now, these are the 2 we have. So let's come down here and create a custom event. And let's call this update score. So from our on pumpkin death event here, we're going to drag these red lines, both of them, back to this function. Because I don't care which type of pumpkin it is. I want them to update the score when they're hit. So then we're going to take our destroyed pumpkin reference, pull this out, and then you can hit ++ on your keyboard, or you can search for increment int. So we'll go ahead and do that. Hook up the execution pins. And then our destroyed pumpkin is going to hold down Alt so we can set that score now that we have incremented it. And then from there, actually what we can do is we can just take our print screen from up there, bring it down here, and go ahead and hook this up so we can see that score. Got a quick error, forgot to hook up the object from the for each loop for our second cast, so it knew what to cast to. My apologies for that. Compile and save. So now we come up right away, we don't see anything printed. Once we go up, we see our score incrementing on our print screen. There we go. We got all 4 of them. Excellent. So now that's working. And we see our pumpkins clean themselves up. And if we wait, we'll see them remove themselves from the outliner and out of memory. So everything is working well. Let's put, let's go ahead and delete these 2 pumpkins. Let's go ahead and add our big smile pumpkin up here, and let's select that. Let's go ahead and change the radius to 500 on that one. I'm just not even going to turn him around. Let's turn him that way just for fun. Control D, duplicate him, and let's do 800 on his just for something different. Go ahead and test the game. There we go. 2 different types of pumpkins. Individual functionality on them. They're all working, exploding. It's a nice pattern. If we wait, we'll see that they clean themselves up out of memory. So at this point, we have everything we need for functional game. One last setting. I apologize. We can see that our smile pumpkin is not cleaning itself up. That would be because we need to go back into our assets folder, go down to pumpkins fractures. And if you remember, we did change some settings on this one. We did not go into smile pumpkin and do that. So if we just scroll down, we simply just turn on remove on sleep. That was 2 and 5, and I'm going to change that to 1.5 and 3. Leave that set. Test one more time. And there we go, that easy. Set that setting at the same time we did the big one. And we see the score is working. Excellent. Now let's get our score and total pumpkins displaying on the screen. So let's go ahead and delete this print string. We know this is working. We don't need that anymore. Going to compile and save that. So in our first person game mode, we're going to want to send this information for the total pumpkins and the pumpkins destroyed out to our HUD, or make that available for our HUD to ask us. So this would be a great use case for some functions. So let's create 2 functions. First one, let's say get current score. I'll even spell it correctly. So on this, we're going to want an output of an integer. So I'm going to hit output. I'm going to create one called score. I'm going to hit the drop down, just make it an integer. And then all we need to do is get destroyed pumpkins and hook that up. And there we go. That one's done. Going to compile and save. Create another function. We're going to call this get total pumpkins. And just like we did in the last one, we're going to create an output. We're going to call this count or total pumpkins or whatever you would like to use. I'm just going to hook total pumpkins up to that and compile and save. There we go. So we have these two functions set up to allow the main HUD or whatever else to reach in here and ask what is the current score and how many pumpkins do we have. So let's go back over to our main HUD. I think we're done with the first person character for right now. We can go ahead and close that. So on the main HUD, let's go ahead and add a few things up in the corner over here so we can show our score to the user. So I'm going to look for a horizontal box. I'm going to add that to the canvas panel. With horizontal box selected, on the anchors, I'm going to choose the upper right corner. Once again, go ahead and reset the position. And then I'm going to go ahead and move this over here a little bit, just so it's away from this corner. So let's say 50 down and 100 on X. Excuse me. Position X, negative 140. Position Y, 50. And we can adjust this here in a moment if we need to. We'll adjust the size in a moment also. So let's get some text boxes. Right now, I'm going to want 3 of them inside of the horizontal box. So I'm going to do 1, 2, and then 3. All children of the horizontal box. This first one, I'm going to come upper right, and I'm going to call this score text. Sorry, let's call it current score. Current score text. That way I'd be a little more explicit about what we've got. The very bottom one, I'm going to call this total pumpkins text. I'm going to go ahead and make that and the current score variables. This one in the middle, all we need to do on this one, it doesn't really need to be named, and I just want to put a slash in there. Now, there are multiple ways to format text, have your different information go in. You can combine that into one text and feed it, that sort of thing. I am just creating 3. I'm going to feed them individually. One way is not necessarily better than the other. So on this one, for the current score, I'm going to set that to 3 zeros. I'll set this to 3 zeros. If you have more than that, you have a much bigger computer than me and running a lot of pumpkins in the game. So I'm going to scroll in a little bit. I'm going to move that over just to where I think it looks good. So yeah, so let's do negative 160 on the X, 40 on the Y. Width is good, alignment's good. We can just click size to content. All right, so let's go ahead and compile and save that so we don't lose it. Let's go over to our event graph. So let's go ahead and just get rid of those. We're going to need a couple variables over here. So current score and total pumpkins. Both of those need to be integers, just like the information coming in, so the data matches. Let's do event initialized. On this, so as soon as the HUD is initialized, let's right click and get game mode. And then we're going to specifically want to cast this to BP first person game mode. Because like I said, you can have multiple game modes in your project. So you need to be specific about which one you want to use. So as this, let's go ahead and promote this to a variable so we can keep a reference of it. I'm just going to call it game mode ref. And then from there, what we want to do as first person game mode, we want to get total pumpkins. Remember the functions that we made. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm just going to use this as the target. And then from there, what we want to do is hold on Alt and drag out a set for our total pumpkins. So right away, we're just at the beginning of the game, we're just going to, or the beginning of this level, we're just going to count the pumpkins and get that variable set. So then what we want to do is on event tick, which I know you will hear a lot of information that event tick is terrible, stay away from it. It really depends upon how you use it. In this case, just asking for the scores is not that demanding on the system. If you wanted to set up a timer and check it every 0.2, 0.3 of a second for performance, something like that, you could do that very easily. For this small of a game, I'm not worried about the score affecting my performance. So on this one, what we're going to do is we're going to pull out a reference to our game mode, and we're going to get current score. Go ahead and hook up that. And then from there, we're going to get our current score and set that. So now that we have these set up, if we wanted to, we could update the text from here. If you want to come back over to designer and click on these, you can create bindings to the variables that you've set up in the back end like this. So for that one, we're just going to set current score. If you want to use the bindings on the back end, let me show you how to do that right quick. So to set the score from the event graph back here, you're going to grab your total pumpkins text, and up here on event initialized, where we're counting the total pumpkins, we're just going ahead and grab that text out. We're going to come up here, we're going to say set text, and we want this function set text down here. Once you go ahead and hook up that execution pin, I'm just going to move this up here for right now. And then honestly, if you wanted to, you could format this text from here, whatever else. You could just hook that up and allow the default conversion to occur. I'm going to file and save. So if I go ahead and hit play, you're going to notice in the upper right hand corner, Shift F1, that it has set our total pumpkins in our text block. And if I shoot one of them, you're going to see our score update. So here we are in this case, using both the bind and the set text from the graph. They both work just as well. So personal preference on how you want to handle things, or if you want to just trust the bindings. So right now we have our pumpkins being counted, we have our score being counted, so now we need to check a win condition. Now that we have everything working, let's create a win screen so the player knows that they've accomplished the task for the game. Let's come back up here to blueprints. I'm going to go into UI. I'm going to right click, go to user interface, and create another widget blueprint. It's just going to be of type user widget. So WBP, I'm going to call this win screen. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. So for the screen, I'm going to add a canvas panel. From there, I want to look for a text block. Go ahead and add that to the canvas panel. With that selected, I'm just going to go ahead and anchor that center top on the screen. I'm going to go ahead and reset the position, but then I'm also going to bring that down here. Let's change the text to "You win." I'm going to change that color, give it a bit of an orange here, a little darker. Personal preference on the font. Just go ahead and crank this up to 125. To size to content, and then I want to, I'm just going to leave that right about there. So I'm going to come back over on the left hand side and look for a button. Go ahead and anchor that to the canvas panel. On the anchors, I'm going to put that right in the middle of the screen, reset its position. Oh, and this is why you watch as to what you have selected. With the button selected, I will set the anchor to the center of the screen, reset its position. Again, set background color. I'm going to make this a little bigger. Place that in the middle of the screen. I'm going to rename this to BTN for button. Play again, so it has a readable name. Then what I'm going to do is, on the left, I'm going to Control D that twice, because I'm going to want 3 buttons on my screen all together. So the second button I will line up here. Third button I will line up just kind of here. You can work on the spacing, have your buttons off to the side, whatever works for you in your game. I'm going to come back up and I'm going to look for text block, and I'm going to child one to each of the buttons. The second button, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to rename it to BTN main menu. We will create the main menu a little later. And then the last one, I'm going to name BTN quit. On these text blocks, play again. And then we can, 45 is good. I'm going to change the color of this text to make it match the buttons a little more. So I'm going to hit this eyedropper and just do that. On the second block, I'm going to and the last one, I'm going to quit. I don't like the order of these two, so I'm going to change it right quick. I could edit out all these mistakes, but I do leave these in just so we can see that this is game dev. Things happen. So main menu, make that 45. Same with quit. Can make that a little bigger, but I think it's okay for now. Go ahead and compile and save. I'm going to come over to the graph. I'm going to go ahead and delete these out. Let's click on button play again. Let's come down underneath and let's do on clicked. And then we're going to open level by name. And for this, let's come over to the first person map. Let's come down to maps. So this one is called first person map, so note the capitalization on it. So I'm just going to type that in here, and we will replace this with our own map here in a bit once we're done testing. And for now, we're going to skip the main menu button, and let's do button quit. Add the on click event for that. And this one is as simple as saying quit game. That's it. We don't need any other references for it. So now we need to figure out how we want to trigger this screen. So let's go back over to the game mode. We can close these functions, and on the event graph, once we're updating the score, that seems like a good time to check the win condition. So when we destroy the last pumpkin and get that last score, this seems like a good spot to check that win condition. So let's add a custom event. And let's just name it check win condition. So now what is our win condition? So I would say I'm going to hold down control so we can get destroyed pumpkins and total pumpkins. So I would think if destroyed pumpkins equals the total pumpkins, let's just put the logic branch in there for that. If that's the case, then we would want to create our widget. And that is going to be our widget blueprint windscreen. We really don't need a reference to this at all based on the options on the windscreen. So I'm not going to set that this time. I'm just going to directly add this to viewport. And then from there, there's a couple things we want to do. So we want to get player controller, because at this point, we're going to switch to UI mode and not game mode. So from the controller, let's set input mode UI only. Go ahead and hook up that execution pin. Scrolling in a little bit. So on this one, we don't have anything we want to necessarily set focus to. And we do not want to lock the mouse cursor, but we do want to flush input. So if the player was still moving, trying to shoot his gun, whatever, we just want to flush those commands out. And then from there, we want to show mouse cursor, because right now it is hidden in the game. So we want to switch this to UI only mode, switch this over, and yes, we want to show the cursor. So I want to compile and save. So this right here on the set input mode UI only, if you remember earlier, when we first came into event begin play, we set input mode game only. This will get triggered when we start or restart the level. So once we have our windscreen and we choose play again, or from the main menu, we choose play game, it will come in and trigger this. So after we update our score, let's simply check win condition. So let's test our game. And there we go. So as you can see right away, my player stopped moving. I can't fire anymore. The mouse cursor is shown. We do have you win. We got play again, main menu, and quit. Main menu isn't hooked to anything. If we quit, it literally quits the game. So let's try that again right quick. Then we want to play again, and it just reloads our level right back to start. Our score is reset. turn, everything is here. So now we have an official game loop. Just keep going and going. So it's always good to check these conditions. Little tip for you. It's always good to check these conditions now when you have a very small level. You've only got 3 or 4 things on the screen to meet conditions like this, instead of having a very large level and hundreds of pumpkins to destroy or multiple quests to complete. It's always good to trigger these early on to make sure they work. Then you can focus on expanding your gameplay. Okay, now let's create a level of our own. I'm going to come back up here to enclose assets. I'm going to click on content. I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this maps so I can keep mine out here. Inside of there, I'm going to right click, say new level. I'm going to call this landscape map. I'm going to file, save all, make sure everything is saved. Then I'll open landscape map. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and close my content browser. Now remember, you can hit Control Space to get back to it about any time and dock it and lay out again if you want to. So right now we have a blank level. We have nothing, no daylight, no land, no nothing. So the easiest way to set this up is if you come up to Window and come down to Environment Light Mixer. So what you can do is it's going to bring up this little window right here. And you have a series of buttons across here. We can create a skylight, create an atmospheric light, create some volumetric fog, and our height fog. Right here, you can play with some initial intensities right away if you want to. I'm going to worry about that a little later. So for right now, here we go. We've got that. And now you can see world is a little more of what we're used to seeing. So right now I'm going to come up to upper left-hand side and go to landscape mode. I'm going to raise my camera up a bit so I can see what's going on. So by default, this thing is huge. So for the game I am playing, I don't need my landscape to be this big. So I'm going to come in here. My game's going to be pretty small. I'm going to change that to 50 by 50. Back up so I can see all of this. This still might be plenty big, but we can work with that for now. So go ahead and look at the rest of your settings for the initial landscape. Come in and figure out how big you want your quads to be. So if we do that, obviously things are a lot smaller. It's going to go ahead and leave mine at the default 63, 1 section per. So you can see this is 8 by 8, which is right here. So if you wanted to size it that way, you could. And then overall resolution. So I'm just going to leave everything else at default with the exception of the scale. I'm just going to put that at 50 instead of 100. And I'm just going to hit create. Depending upon your machine, this may take a moment. So once that's done, you'll notice shaders will take a little longer to complete, but you can go ahead and get started in the meantime. If you've never used the landscape tools before, I'll give you just a quick intro to them. If you're interested in learning more about the landscape tools and materials and those types of things, let me know down in the comments and I'm happy to look into making a video for you. So on the left, we were on the manage screen that's how we created our initial block. Then it's going to move you over to the sculpt. This is how you make the variations in your terrain with the different hills and rivers and everything else. So right now we have the default brush type. You can change what type of brush you have. As you can see, each one of them act just a little differently and will make different types of marks in your landscape. So we don't want that. I'm going to come back over and use the default brush. Underneath is your fall off options. If you want that to be really sharp, very round, or more smooth. The strength of the tool right here, I'm going to go ahead and crank this up just to show you. So if I hold that down, you'll see everything comes up really fast. If I move that to lower than what it was, you notice things don't raise quite as quickly. It's usually best to start small and you can work from there. It's very easy to add some more. It gets a little weird if you need to start taking a lot off. So underneath of that, you have your brush size. So if you want this to affect large parts of the world, you can do that. If you want to touch up just very small little areas, you can. So your brush fall off is how quickly the smoothness from this falls off in the shape. Up above, you have your erase tools, your smooth, your flattens, ramps, erosions. Feel free to come in, play with these. You can always wipe this out and create a new one very easily. So for right now, I'm going to use sculpt on these settings right here. I'm going to make this brush a little bigger. And since we've only got a small number of assets to work with, I don't want to make this very big. So I think what I'm going to do for right now is I definitely don't want my player to see outside of the world. So I'm going to go ahead and make that bigger. So these will come up faster for me. Let's go ahead and turn that strength up a lot more. There we go. And I can smooth these out here in just a little bit. So I'm just going to make kind of a starting area right here. I'm going to have the player start right here so they can look down through. Let's make a little alcove here. Little side area for them to go play in. And from here we can have a little bit bigger area. I am just freehanding this right now, crew. I am just kind of making this up as I go. We can refine this more later. So if you have this situation right here where I brought this one spot up too far, if you hold down shift, it will reverse that at the same strength you're working on. So be careful. It will run that down very fast. And this is where things like smooth and flatten come into play. So you can smooth all that out or just flatten things off completely if you need to. So like I said, feel free to play with the other brushes. So if we want to erase all together, we can do that and it will go back down to the original height. So let's come back to my sculpting. Let's come over here. Let's maybe close this in a little bit before we maybe round this out and make another little alcove right there for no reason. And we can change this, like I said, as we go. So let's make these a little higher, not that high. Although that's not a bad feature. So let me smooth that a little bit. Turn the strength down. Just want to round that off a little bit. Leave that flat area there for now. But I think what we definitely want to do is flatten. So the sides of these hills are very sharp, so our player cannot run up them. It looks like we need to build that up some more. So I'm just going to come in here right quick and make sure a lot of these are sharp. And you can find more of that through play testing. Just going to add a little more bulk to these. If you wanted to back here, you could crank your brush way up and you really could create let's turn the fall off down. It's kind of a visually striking tall mountain or something in the background that you could put a decent material on later or something if you wanted to. Just different ideas, just showing you what the brushes can do. I'm going to use the erosion brush. Well, that was too much. So I'm going to Control Z that and turn the strength way down. There you can see that can add some natural smoothing on some of that. And there's a lot of settings in here that you can change for the erosion type and brush size and all that. Let's come back into here. Turn that up, turn the brush size down a bit. And this part is just up to your imagination. Just make whatever you can. At some point when you think this is looking decent, bring that up a little more. This part out here doesn't matter because what I'm going to do is just have my player inside of here. So I want to come back to selection mode. I'm going to come back down here, and then what I'm going to do is hit the add. I'm going to come up to the basics, and I'm going to grab a player start. I'm going to put it in here, slow my camera down. And I'm going to grab him, and I'm going to face him this way. Then if you hit play, you can come in and actually run around the world and get a sense of size. Check your sprint speed, see how that's working for you. As you can see, this world is quite large. So this is a lot bigger than I even originally thought we were going to. There's our tall mountain in the background. We can check some slopes. As you can see, that one I can kind of run up that. I don't know that I really want that to occur. And these are things that you can go back to landscape mode, check out the brushes and fix all that and make these a lot sharper, just whatever features you want in your landscape. You can actually honestly turn on some music and just get lost in the landscape tool for a while. So for the purposes of this, I think this is pretty good for now. I'll come back here, exit play. So I think what I'm going to do is, one of the initial challenges I gave myself is to only use the materials and the content that came in the gamedev TV Halloween pack. So I want to come in here and go down to assets. If I come to path, you'll see they have this ground material. I'm just going to drag that out. I'm going to click on my landscape. I'm going to grab this ground material and I'm going to put it in that slot. So as you can see right here, that's a very shiny material, but we will fix some of the lighting, add the exponential fog and everything else here, and take care of that here in a little bit. So while everything is still lit, I think what I'm going to do is start adding in some of the other components. So let's go to trees. Let's add big scary tree right here. So with the scale of our landscape and our character, tree doesn't look very big. Let me check and make sure that's got the, yeah, it's got the tree material on it. So let's scale this guy up. There we go. Just push him down into the ground a little bit. Maybe rotate it some so it fits the environment a little more. There we go. So something to keep in mind on these trees and a few other objects, we didn't really go over the default collisions that come with them. So for the game we're making, it is okay. But if you do want to check those out, go ahead and double click on one of these, open it up. If you come over here to these options, hit show, you can do simple collision. You're going to see right here, by default, Unreal added these very large boxes around them. So when your character's running around, like, you're not going to be able to run into this space, that sort of thing. If you want to, you can come up to the collision menu, you can remove collision, and then you can add some box collisions, a couple spheres if you wanted to around here to clean this up. I'm not going to worry about it in this video, as I'm just going to design my level so these are not a problem. But I just wanted to show these to you as each of them are a little different. Let's go ahead and close that. We can close our windscreen and clean up this a little bit. So back on our landscape, once again, our light is very bright, so it's very washed out. Let's just kind of decorate this a little bit as we see fit. I may speed up this part of the video so you guys don't sit through too much of this, but you get the general idea. And I do encourage you to kind of make your own. I would love to see what you guys come up with. So I'm going to go ahead and place a few more trees. I'll speed up this part of the video and be back with you in just a moment. So there we go. Now I got some trees placed in the environment, starting to make it look a little more interesting. So now what we can do with the grass, I wanted to show you that with the landscape tool. So right now, if we come down, let me find the starting position. If we were to come up and take the grass the way it is right now and just kind of add some to the environment like this. For one, this is very tedious to place, and you could copy and paste large batches, whatever. But if you come in and play the game, you're going to notice like you hit the grass, like you can't walk through it. There are colliders on the grass. You could go in and take the colliders off through the mesh edit tool. You could set the collision to ignore the player if you wanted to, but I'm going to take a little bit different approach. I'm going to use the landscape tool. I'm going to come up here, come back over to foliage instead of landscape. We're going to grab both of our grass assets and we're just going to drop them right here. We're going to make sure they're both selected like that. Then what we can do, much like the paint tool, so we do paint, we have our brush size, our paint density. So some of the difference on this one is on this, if you come in and let's click on the first piece of grass here, we have our density setting to figure out like how intense we want the grass on there. So if I were to just click the mouse once right now, this is what it is painted on the landscape. And the big difference is if I'm to play the game right now, come in and I can run right through this grass. So I don't have to worry about collisions or anything else. So one of the problems I see right away is this grass is way too big. So let's come in, move the camera. So if I hold down Shift, I can erase. So on the first piece of grass, let's come in, and when we do scale X, right now it's a uniform size of 1:1. So let's do 0.15 to 0.75. And we're going to leave the scaling as uniform on most of this. Our density, we can turn this down a little bit if we wanted to. And then if we want any sort of Z offset, so if something sticks up too far, we can change that. If we want to align to the normal, so if we paint up the side of the hill, will the grass still stick straight up and down, or align with the face and grow out sideways? Obviously with the grass, we don't want it growing sideways, so probably don't want that. I don't think we'll be painting it on the hill, but that's what that is for. Other ground slope angles, just everything else you want to put on here. It's going to ask you if it's static or movable, culling distances. There's a lot of settings in here that we don't necessarily need to worry about for this project, but it is good if you're going to use this tool to spend some time and just kind of look at those. Let's go ahead and click on the other piece of grass. Let's make this one 0.2 and 0.6. Let's try that. Come back up, brush size. let's go ahead and play the game. So as we see right now, these are a lot better sizes. There's a lot of randomness in there. Might want to play with the settings to have it randomly turn the grass based on the y-axis. To me, this still might be a little thick. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase that. I'm going to turn paint density down to, let's do 0.2. I'm going to come in here and paint some of this. That seems like a little bit nicer sprawl to me. So depending upon what we want to do in certain areas, like I said, we can erase. You can make sure there's some around the tree, but the problem is like this, it grows on the tree also. So we can turn the brush way down. And there's some other settings you can do to try and avoid other meshes and stuff like that. But for right now, I'm going to say this is fine. I'm going to stay away from my trees altogether. I'm going to stay off my hillside. So here's an example of what I was talking about of aligned normals. So as we turn to go up the hill, the normal starts facing out this way and the grass would align with that. So for now, I'm just going to get rid of that. For mine, I want to erase kind of a trail through the middle to kind of help guide the player a little bit. Make sure I'm off the edges. Just kind of give a little visual clue as to the different areas I want them to go to. So there's a lot of great visual stuff you can do with landscape design. It's a lot of fun to get into. It really is. So I'm going to go ahead and make my brush size a little bigger again. Just kind of place some other grass around here. We'll come through and edit it when we need to. All right, so that is the foliage tool. Finish my trail, and then I think we're done with that. I'll just leave some sparsely set in the middle. Go back to selection mode. Now I'm going to spend some time and just kind of set dress my environment with some of the houses. One thing I want to show you right quick. Let's do that. Let's go over to house parts. So this kit comes with our predetermined houses here. I'll put these two out so we can kind of see them. They look really good. They're pretty similar. But it also comes with individual house parts, so you can make your own. So on this, I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bigger. And then what we can do is, if we wanted to, we could set out a base. Let's get a door. And line these up the best you can. These kind of give me Whoville sort of vibes a little bit. But let's go with that. So I am going to, let's see here. Let's put another base on there. I'm just going to let those overlap a little bit. Put this one on here. And just have a wonky structure. If I want to do, say, 2 stories on this, I want to turn this one. And what I want to do is I want to grab this guy and put him out here. Let's add this up here. If we wanted to add some additional windows and just kind of break it up a little bit, we could do that. Windows backwards, so I'm going to turn it around. So then what we can do is, if you build one of these structures, hopefully better than this one. I'm a programmer, folks, not an artist. What you can do is build one of these, and if you want to reuse this in your game, so I'm going to go ahead and select these different pieces. If you know they're all together in the hierarchy, you can select them over there too. And once I know I have everything, I'll just do a little test move here. Nope, see, I forgot the window. So I'm going to Control Z that. I'm going to Control click the window. So now that I have everything, I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to come down to level and then create packed level actor. Go ahead and select these defaults. It's going to ask you where you want your pivot, that sort of thing. I'm going to say okay. It's going to ask me where I want these. If I want, I can come to assets, right click, create a new folder, and say packed level actors. I can go ahead and put that in here and just call this my house. Then from there, it's going to create the blueprints for it. I'm just going to save it in the same spot. So then next time I want to use one of these in my level, I can just reach in and grab that, and there we go. There's multiple ways to do that. That's just a very easy way. This works well with level streaming and stuff like that if you do get that set up. So I'm going to delete these out because I don't want them right in the middle like that. I like these houses here, but let's scale them up. Things need to be big. Make sure that's sitting in the ground a little bit. Got it back. So I'm going to run around and add some various other elements to the environment just to kind of set dress it a little bit, and then we'll be back to adding the pumpkins and figuring out how we want the game to flow. So I will speed this part up and be right back. There we go, folks. I think you get a general idea of set dressing now and what some of the different things are you can do with it. So for right now, I'm just doing one final kind of walkthrough on my level. Things look pretty good. Could use a few more tombstones scattered around. Looks like I need to be careful of that one because it's not quite in the ground. And that could be just resetting the pivot point maybe and updating them all at once, or I could just keep that in mind when I go through and add them into the ground. I added the fence here for just kind of a logical reason why I couldn't approach the tree anymore. We have our sprint, but I think I need to update the speed a lot for the size of this world. I don't think we're going to get around very quickly. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Let's go back to first person. Blueprints. of our first person character, and then we can just set our sprint speed. Let's go 1500 maybe. Update that. Then from here, let's go ahead and go back to our starting point. And let's drag out the rifle pickup. Just put that right in front of us here, and we'll just make that kind of obvious. If we wanted to, we could even decorate it a little bit. So let's see here. Let's put this here. Let's put some steps in front of it maybe. Then I think I want to grab this guy, bring him into the world, wherever that may. Oh, I didn't reset the pivot point on this guy. Let's do that right quick. Let's go to modeling, Xform. Just put him in the center. Just accept, and we'll go back to selection mode. Turn my snapping back on. Now if you play our game, all right, maybe we don't need the stairs. We'll play with that a little bit. So for right now, let's fix some of this lighting and get better mood going on in here. So I'm going to come over to the outliner. And for right now, I'm going to highlight all of these environment pieces. I'm going to right click them, go down to move to, and create new folder. If you want to name that folder, you can come up to the top, F2. It's an environment, that way I can kind of close those up and keep this nice and clean. Okay, let's fix up the environment a little bit. So this is a little nicer to look at, and maybe a little bit of a creepier vibe. So right now, let's take the directional light, and I want to change this color. Let's come over here, and let's get a pretty orange kind of hue on it. Let's go up to the add button. Let's come down to volumes, and let's find post-processing volume. Go ahead and add this in. This really doesn't matter in the world where you have this or the way we're going to use it. And the reason that is first thing I want to come over here and find is the infinite extent unbound. Go ahead and turn that on. That way it affects the entire world and not just this space. I'm going to come back here. I'm going to come over to exposure. I'm going to turn on metering mode. I'm going to bring this down to manual. You're going to see right away everything goes dark. So I'm going to turn on the exposure compensation. I'm going to set this to, let's try 11. Okay, that's not bad. A little dark. Let's try 11.5 and just put just a little bit more in there. do want to come down here and maybe add a little bit of bloom. So let's find that. Bloom is up a little bit, excuse me. Set this intensity up to 1 so I can get that little extra glow around the windows. But I don't want to keep it at the windows, so let's do maybe 3. So we can take some of that out of the atmosphere and keep the bloom with the windows. So let's go down a little bit. So on this project, by default, when you start Unreal anymore, Lumen is your default lighting space. So I do have that turned on for this project. If you don't want to use Lumen, you can go to your global illumination, turn that on, switch that to none, or you could test out screen space. For me, I am going to leave Lumen on because I know my PC can kind of handle it. Same on these. So as you move around the world, you'll notice some of these fog reflections, like right here. It's kind of faint. You can turn on the scene lighting quality and turn this up, or if you want to, you can turn on the final gather quality, and this really will clean up those areas. Now, keep in mind, anything with Lumen that you do increase, it will increase your CPU or GPU usage, excuse me. So I'm going to leave that off for now. And same with reflections and reflection quality. You can really kind of turn those up and get some just beautiful looking scenes. With the low poly pieces we have from gamedev TV, I don't know if that's super important right now, but I just wanted to go over that since we are covering the post-processing volume. There are a ton of options in here with your color grading and shadows and everything else that you can do with post-processing. There's some wonderful tutorials out there to get some really great film grain and exposure effects and everything else going. These are the basics that I'm using for this project. So let's go ahead and play test this a little bit. So there we go. I can see it's done. Shooting. That on the grass. We've got some of this. We got some a little bit of illumination from the candles. It's a little dark yet, so I might turn the lights up a little bit more, but other than that, I think it gives a little bit of a creepy vibe that I was looking for. So so let's come back to let's try the exposure setting first in the post-processing volume. Might be a little too much. All right, let's just try 12. So now what we can do is once you get your environment to where you like it, we can then place our pumpkins and finally have our game ready to play. So I'm going to come over to blueprints. I'm going to go ahead and dock this in layout, although it doesn't need to be quite so big. Oh, excuse me, wrong one. Blueprints, there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and place this one here. And then I'm going to come back up to the top. I'm going to increase his radius to, let's do nice and big on him. So I'm going to set him to 1200. And then from here, it is just a matter of placing the pumpkins and making sure that they are on the ground. So I like to lift them and then hit the end key to place them, because if they are slightly elevated, when the game starts, they will just fall to the ground and break on their own. I'm going to control D that and place one here. Grab this one. So we're going to lift and end. Put him kind of an obvious spot here. So for the sake of the tutorial, I'm not going to place a ton of pumpkins around. I'm just going to put a few in here so you get the idea of what we're going for. And we could put one here. And then what I'll do is I'll make this one look away. I will increase its look at radius a lot. Let's do 1500 just so I make sure I capture part of this walkway. Add this here. So I'm not going to fill out this entire level. I'm just going to place them around so you guys can just kind of see the general idea of what I'm going after. My test project, I had 155 pumpkins, I believe, on the level, just kind of scattered about through all these areas. And I did cluster some up, so we had quite a bit of explosions going on the screen at the same time just to test some things out. So play with it, have fun, see what your PC can handle. Just try to keep it balanced a little bit if you are going to package this and send it out. And I will be going over packaging at the end of the video. Let's do some of this and go ahead and do some of this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and play test right quick. There's our sprint. We have our 16 pumpkins up here. Apparently I'm a bad shot, so let's rush over here. Pumpkin turn the left, that's good. Sprint's a little fast, but I'll do this for now. Okay, so I clicked really fast there, but we did get our windscreen and I did accidentally click the play again. And as you can see, it took us to this level, which is what we had hardcoded on that button. So that is a good reminder to go into our blueprints under UI. Let's open up the windscreen. Let's go ahead and go to graph. If we hit Control Space, we can go down to map if we need to and remind ourselves that we named our level landscape_map. Go ahead and compile and save. That way we don't need our third-person map anymore. We'll very quickly play test this again. There we go. Okay, so that button is now working. So as you can see, we have our game, we have our pumpkin count working, we have our destroyed pumpkin score working. And we just need to fill out the level a little more and make it a little more challenging. You can turn these upside down and scale them correctly and put a pumpkin in them. You can also, depending upon the house, you could put a pumpkin on the side of the house. I mean, there's lots of places to go in and add these. So just watch your lighting and make sure the pumpkins are visible for the player. So now let's add a main menu screen. to our game. So when I do these, I always like the main menus that have a little bit of actionable stuff on them, not just a static picture. So I'm going to come down to, well, first I'm going to file, save all, make sure we don't lose anything. I'm going to come down to maps. I'm going to right click, create a new level. I'm going to call this main menu. Go ahead and save selected. Go ahead and open that up. So same thing as before. Let's come over to window, get the environment light mixer. Just go ahead and add what we need to into the world. And just like we had before, we have standard lighting in a new area. What I want to do on this one, though, a little different. I'm not going to add a landscape and all that. I'm going to go back into our asset areas. And with this gamedev TV pack, if you come into, I think I put it in path, there is just a little bit of a landscape. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that out into the world. I'm going to find it. Here we go. I did not reset the position on this one. So that's fine. We can work with it right over here the way it is. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull out a new player start. I'm going to go to basic, player start. I'll put this here. Just want to kind of rotate it. I think what I'm going to do is a lot like we did with the other area. I'm going to change the light, add the post-processing, and just do a little bit of set decoration right here. So I'm just going to add a couple of these guys. Let's add, oops, sorry about that. Let's add one of these pre-built houses on here. Of course, we got to have a creepy tree. I think it matters too much. So what we're going to do is just have our player standing right here, unable to move. Let's go ahead and move this guy over here. So we're going to have a little bit of a collision problem with those pumpkins, with our fractured pumpkins. So what we can do is I'm going to go ahead and delete those. I'm going to go back to the basic static mesh pumpkins that came straight out of Blender, not the chaos fractured ones. I'm just going to go ahead and set a few of these up because they are just for set decoration. And then that way when we play, nothing falls. All right. So now what we need to do, go and grab this guy and make sure, yeah, he's up. So what we can do now, let's come back to our windscreen while we still have it open. And I want to grab the, or right click on the button main menu, or sorry. While we still have our windscreen open, let's come over and click on main menu. Let's go ahead and click on the on click event. And for this one, just like we did up here, let's just do open level by name. And if you need to, you can come back to maps and see that what you named it. In my case, it was main menu. I'm going to come on, say I'm going to close this. I'm going to close first person character. I'm going to file save all. I'm going to come back up to blueprints and come into UI. I'm going to create a new user interface widget blueprint. User widget. Call this WBP main menu. So same thing as we've done before. So on this, we're going to drag out a canvas. And in this case, I'm just going to add 2 buttons. I'm going to have a play game, and then I also want a quick game. If you later on want to expand this, take this setup, expand this and add an option screen for your volume and control sensitivity and whatnot, feel free. And I need a text add to each. I'm going to name this BTN play game. I'm going to name this one BTN quit. So I think what I'm going to do on this one, I'm going to click on BTN play game. I'm going to anchor it on the left side in the middle. And I'm going to reset the Y position. Then we're going to take this and we're going to move it out a little bit. Let's go maybe here. Size the content. We're going to, on the text, just going to say play game. And I think we want to make that about 45, so it's a little more readable. On the button, I want to make the background color more of an orange like we had before. And then on the other button, highlight that, same thing. We're going to anchor it to left middle, reset. Just drag that out to about here, size it to content. For the text, I'm going to say quick game. Make the text 45. Then on the button, set the background color. I'm going to use the eyedropper so I get the same color as the other one, almost. Or we can just copy this value. There we go. So let's go to the graph. Just going to get rid of these. And this is pretty straightforward. So I'm going to click on button play game, on click, just like we've done before. Open level by name. And I believe called it landscape map. And then on button quick, we come down here and we say quick game. Compile, save. I'm just going to go ahead and mount that to main IDE for a moment. Then we need to, I'm going to come up here. I'm going to come down to game mode. Going to create game mode. I'm going to call this main menu game mode. And I'm just going to go ahead and save this in the blueprints folder for now. On the right hand side, I'm going to come over to the classes. We're going to game session, just regular player controller, regular HUD. So I'm going to leave these as kind of the default, and I'm going to show you why. If I come back here to main menu now, and I hit play, you're going to notice I don't have regular character arms. I'm not jumping. I'm in more of a view only, kind of just fly around camera. So that's going to be great for what we want on the main. So now all we need to do is come up here. I'm going to open this level blueprint. Just going to go ahead and get rid of that node. On this one, we want to create widget. We want our main menu widget. Then we need to add that to a viewport. Make sure we hook up the return node to the target on that one. Then let's get the player controller. To set show mouse cursor, I want that to be true because it's a menu system. And then off of this, we also want to set input mode UI only. That way our character is not moving around. So go ahead and compile and save. So there we go. We have our basis of a main menu with some of our trees and elements right here. If we want to, I want to take the player start piece and I want to lean him back just a little bit. We get a little bit more of an angle. We hit play, we go right into our game, but we did not switch game modes. So now that we have our main menu UI set up and we've created our main menu game mode with the main menu level loaded, we want to come here, we want to come down to world override, and we want to select our main menu game mode here. That way, every time this level loads, it will load that game menu, or game mode, excuse me. And when we play our game, we'll notice we can't play our other level. So we're going to exit out of that. We're going to go to maps. We're going to load the landscape map. We're going to come up to that center menu. Then we're going to override by selecting our BP first person game mode. So this ties back to what I was talking about earlier. So you can have different game modes per level within your game. This way you can set up different mechanics or different type of gameplay per level. So I'm going to file, save all. I'm going to go ahead and go back to main menu. I'm going to hit start. I'm going to hit play game. And now you notice we can go in, we can play our game. So the last thing we need to do is just kind of set the mood on our main menu level here. I'm going to come in very quickly and just set this up very similar to what we did to our game level or landscape level. So I'm going to add a post-processing volume. We're going to set the infinite extent unbound. And we want to come into exposure, set that to manual. About 10.5. Want to come to our directional light. Let's kind of change that color again. If you want to change the direction of it, you can hold down the right control key and L, and this will allow you to alter which way the sun is pointing. That way you can get some interesting shadows on your level. Maybe highlight the house a little more, that sort of thing. So just find something that looks good. I do like those shadows. Kind of a nice creepy vibe. So I'm going to go ahead and go with this. Go ahead and spend some time and alter this to what works best for you. If we play game, then we'll come right in here. We're going to play test again real quick. Just to make sure all of our transitions are working. Go ahead and go back to main menu, and you'll see that the other game mode kicked in and everything is working. So there we go. That is a very light version of what I had built. At this point, you can very easily expand this. Like I said, you could set an options menu on the landscape map. You could go in and maybe set a timer. And that way your player has to clear all the pumpkins within a certain amount of time. It'd be very easy to set up within your level instance. From here, let's go ahead and talk about packaging the game right quick so you can give this to your friends to play so they don't have to have the Unreal Editor installed. So to do this, let's go up to Edit, Project Settings. Let's go into Map and Modes, just to make sure we have our default game mode here. We want our game default map to be main menu. And you can check some of these other options down through here if you want. For this, I'm not going to worry too much about some of the encryption or anything else that you would normally do for a paid game. In this case, we're just going to share it with our friends or on itch.io. Come down to packaging. You can check some of these if you want to. Once again, I'm not going to go super in depth on some of these. Build configuration. This is where you can ship from development to shipping, and it will change your output just a little bit. So I'm going to come to platforms. I'm going to come down to Windows. I'm going to say package product. I'm going to leave all of this the same. It's going to ask me where I want to package this. I'm just going to come up to Real Exports. I'm going to create a new folder and put everything in here. And if you want to get into setting the icon for your game, some of the other names, stuff like that, that is also in project settings. So depending upon your machine, this will take a few minutes to run. So I will go ahead and speed up the video. So it looks like I have a problem with the new Fab plugin. So let me get rid of that plugin and we'll try this build again. Welcome to gamedev, folks. Try this again. There we go. Looks like the new Fab plugin was a problem. So now if we come to the folder that we exported to, we'll find our Pumpkin Smash game exe right here. So here we go, folks. Here is our game running in an exe form on Windows, full screen. Adding some music or other gameplay enhancements would really make this stand out. So I think this looks pretty good right here, considering the short amount of time we spent on this screen. Little background music would really improve this level, I think. Could go into our master field and turn up the angular velocity to make these explode much bigger. It's all about fine-tuning and getting the experience you want. Throwing something together in one day, I figured this is not too bad, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you found this useful, please like and subscribe to the channel. It encourages me to build more of these for you. I hope you followed along and built your own version of this game template and expand upon it. These little one-day or weekend-long projects is a great way to enhance your game dev skills. Thanks again to the folks over at Gamedev TV for making this content free, and I'll see you guys next time.